Recently, I was looking at the website of the French brand Charlie. Charlie's been around for about 10 years and they produce a lot of different watches, and I had to really have a good look at all the different watches they had from their range, and quite a few of them were standing out to me. But out of all of their range, there was one watch that really stood out to me. This Concordia Expedition. And when I saw it, I just knew that I wanted to get hands-on with it. Hello, you're watching James. My name's James, you're watching me, and I am talking about watches. And luckily enough, I've been able to get hands-on with it because this particular watch was sent out to me by Charlie on loan. Unfortunately, I am going to have to send this one back, but I have had the opportunity to have it for a couple of weeks, wear it almost every single day and get a really good understanding of this specific watch to allow me to make this review video. Sadly, after I finish making this video, I am going to be sending it back, but it is definitely worth having a look at because I think it is actually something rather special, just like a lot of the other watches that they have for sale. If you jump on their website, you'll see that first of all that they've been around for some time. They're not just an online sales, they also have a physical store in France, and the amount of watches they have has actually been quite surprising for me as I kept looking at their web store. There are lots of different varieties of styles, lots of different versions of particular watches, and some really lovely looking watches as well. But out of all of the ones that I saw, it was this diver that they had on offer, this Concordia Expedition in this particular format that really stood out to me. And I say that this was this particular format because there are quite a few variations of it, different dial variations of it. There was a GMT variation of it, but it was this three-hander with this blue textured dial that ended up being the one that I wanted to get hands-on with. And this one, as you look at it on the website, you'll see that it is 1,245 Australian dollars. It is powered by a Swiss Soprod automatic movement. It has 300 meters of water resistance, a sapphire crystal, and well, some very good looks. And there was something else that really stood out to me about this one that really made me wanted to get hands-on with it. In fact, there were two things about it that really stood out to me that wanted me to get hands-on with it. Firstly, it was the blue dial, and we'll come back to that shortly because as soon as I saw that textured wave blue fume dial, I thought, wow, that's quite nice, and it's not too over the top either. A subtle textured blue wavy dial, well, that's always grabs my attention, but it was more something else. It was more the fact that this one, albeit a dive watch with 300 meters of water resistance, to me doesn't scream dive watch. To me, it feels and looks a little bit more like a Garda watch or a sports style watch, but then still has the added functionality of it actually being a dive watch with a 120-click unidirectional bezel. And I say that it looks or feels a little bit more like a sports watch to me because of that slimmer bezel. I'll come back to that, and I'll come back to that because I think dive watches are fantastic. I love dive watches, but I find that I don't end up wearing them as much as I used to. And this one might be that nice blend of dive watch aesthetics, but also a slight sporty look to it as well that somewhat tones down the dive aesthetics of it. And I'm going to definitely talk about this dial because it was the thing that caught my attention first, but let's talk about the size first because it has a great set of dimensions because the case of this one is exactly 40 millimeters. It has a height of 12.5 millimeters, a really nice 47.3 millimeter lug to lug, and probably what you expect out of these watches now, or watches like this, that it has a 20 mil lug width with that nice taper down to 16 millimeters and 146 grams. Fit to my 17 centimeter wrist. And what I do like about this as I opened the package of this one was that it was already pretty much pre-sized to my wrist, but then still had spare links in there. So it allowed me to have this one arrive internationally and then do very little to have it sized to fit me perfectly, yet still have those spare links. But of course it was the dial that, well, it was what really initially grabbed my attention because it has this beautiful blue dial which suits a diver style watch for me. But it has that 3D textured dial which seems to be something that is standing more and more out to me. It has that fume effect which gives that point of interest. But it's all done in a relatively subtle way, but enough that there is interest. There is 3D elements to it with those sort of cutaway lines, but it's not looking so intensely 3D that it detracts from then the rest of the watch. What I will say is then there are other elements to it that are semi-molded, semi-printed onto the dial, including the minute track that runs around the outside, the wording down there above the 6 o'clock date window, and the general name. The logo itself looks like it's applied. It could be partially included in that dial, but it has a silver look to it. But then, of course, on top of all of that, we have those applied markers in stainless steel, polished, and there's a lot of lume then there is filled into those markers. And that then reflects really nicely with those pencil style hands, because they are also stainless steel polished with a whole lot of lume inside them. So when you do turn the lights off with this particular watch, there's plenty of lume to look at, and because it is a 300-meter diver, well, you could absolutely use this one whilst diving. You'll of course have seen that date window at the 6 o'clock, which I do certainly appreciate. It just seems to add to the symmetry of any dial if they put the date at the 6, and they've chosen to use a white background, which I think in this case was a good idea because it then matches in with those large lume dots. Now all of that is covered by what looks like a single domed sapphire crystal, but it is a lightly domed single dome, because if you look at an extreme angles, you'll see a very slight distortion, but it's not one of those sort of heavy distortions that you see on some watches. It's just very slight at an extreme angle, but that also has a rather interesting beveled edge of that sapphire crystal, leading down to that aluminium insert in that slightly thinner bezel. The thing that really stood out to me about this watch was partly how slim that bezel is, but also being silver, having that aluminium insert then sort of blends into the case. So it gives me, for me anyway, a sort of a sports Garter style look to it and feel on wrist, yet of course does still have that functionality, being a 120 click unidirectional bezel with a very nice bezel action. Lovely click, feels very solid, looks very good, and it all lines up perfectly. Now normally I would talk about the case next, and I'm going to of course talk about the case, but I want to talk about the crown first because it is a real feature of this watch. It is a sort of conical style crown that tapers downwards out away from the watch a little bit. It has a lot of interesting texture. It is signed, of course, but it has this blue anodized ring amongst it, which then helps to reflect and integrate that blue crown with the blue dial, which I do appreciate. It's a nice looking crown, it's a nice feeling crown, but it just has some elements to it that I think make it stand out above probably any other crown that I have experienced. Now, as you would have expect with a 300-meter diver, it is a screw down crown. There is the quick set for the date, and this SoProd Swiss movement also features hand winding and hacking. The case itself is actually relatively simple in its design, but it has a lovely curvature to it, which helps with how it then fits down onto wrist. Because this watch on my 17-centimeter wrist, well, it's really comfortable. Those sizes of this particular watch, but that curvature allows it to sit down onto my wrist really nice. And it feels comfortable partly because of that curvature, but also just how soft it is, and that might have to do a little bit to do with the brushing that's on the side of the case, which then is also reflected on the tops of the lugs, but thankfully is broken up with a very nice chamfered edge that is polished, which I always appreciate on any watch because I love that combination of brushing and polishing, and then of course brushing again. What is nice to see on this watch is the movement itself. A SoProd movement, which, well, to me looks great through that see-through case back, but what I like more about this one is what they've done surrounding that see-through window. They've included that sort of striped pattern that reflects the dial of the watch, allowing for the case back to then sort of integrate with the dial of the watch, which I like. It makes it feel like much more of a cohesive unit rather than just a case back that has been taken off the shelf and put onto this watch. There is some details on there. It is in French because this is a French watch, but it allows you to know that there is 300 meters of water resistance and that the watch is made in France. You'll also see, as you look at the case back of this one, look at those solid lugs that are attached on the bracelet, that they have a quick release function, which makes it very easy to swap this one out with other straps if that's what you choose to do so. And this one actually does come with other options too. Came with this beautiful blue rubber strap, which, well, it just reflects in a nice way with the color of the dial, but also makes this watch nice and comfortable too. And it's nice to have the option and the ease of swapping them back and forth between the bracelet and a different variation of strap. I have predominantly been wearing this one on the bracelet, however, because I do prefer bracelets over rubber straps. And this one has been nice to wear on the bracelet, partly because of the balance between the head of the watch and the weight of the bracelet, but also because it's a nice quality and comfortable bracelet. A bracelet that is brushed on the top, polished on the sides, and as you can see, they use screws to then adjust the bracelet if you want. It is one of those smaller, all-milled, friction-based clasps, which I think some people may look at this and go, I wish there was a different style of clasp on there. And I do understand people saying that, especially at the moment, especially in this price category. However, with my experience now with watches, with the amount of watches, the amount of clasps that I've had, I've realized something about these more newer sort of on-the-fly clasps. I think they're great, but I think they need to be right for the watch. Some of these sort of more generic on-the-fly clasps can be quite bulky, and I think that would detract from this particular watch. I like this slightly smaller style fitting in with this taper down on this bracelet, and I don't mind that there's micro adjust. This watch has been sized so it fits me perfectly, and I appreciate the smaller clasp. I appreciate that it is also milled. I appreciate that it's relatively thin so it sits down under my wrist nicely, but I do question the fact that it is a friction-based clasp. They're not my favorite. I would prefer if it was this clasp, but with a double pusher. But as I've been wearing this one over the past couple of weeks, there definitely have been a few things that have been standing out to me. And the thing that has been standing out to me most is just how many times I capture myself staring at this watch, because it has a very easy wearability feel to it. It sort of looks good, it has great legibility, it has a great size, it feels nice on wrist, it's easy to wear day to day, but it has enough of those details and those interest points that have been capturing my attention and making me actually want to put this watch on the following day versus something else that is within my collection. Charlie, the brand, thank you very much for lending me this watch. I'm very keen to see more that the brand has to offer, and I'm going to be keeping an eye on them as a result of that. But until I get another one from this brand, and I hope that I do, well, perhaps you could watch one of my other videos next.